Hi, everyone. Welcome to Bertina's Spiritual Sanctuary, where we'll begin an exploration into your spiritual path, no matter what that might be. My name is Bertina. I am the owner of Bertina LLC, which is a spiritual website, services, a little bit of everything to help people really connect with their spiritual path. Now, before we get into our talk today, let's talk a little bit about spirituality. Spirituality and religion are different, and I'm not here to say one is good or one is bad. Spirituality just has a lot more freedom of you selecting your path and finding your own way. Some may hold religious connotations, some may not. But between that, my history degree, my religious studies degree, and all of those, I really, really, really love looking at historical aspects. And with today being Friday the 13th, and the idea of a historical significance impacting modern time is just really interesting to me. So I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I did researching and putting it together. And if you have any questions at any time, please email me at bertina@bertina.org, which how you spell my name is Bertena. And so it's Bertina@Bertina.org. My website is Bertina.org. And then you'll also notice that I do services in Nashville at yourcosmicconnections.com. So just come on, email me, ask me any questions, anything like that, and I will be glad to answer and have a discussion with you. So let's get started on this discussion of Friday the 13th. One of the things that I love to study and I love to teach other people is how to honor the goddess and your divine feminine. So, with Friday the 13th kind of being shrouded in superstition, many people associate that date with bad luck, ominous occurrences, things like that. But if you look at the historical roots, it's really different. It has a whole different story. It is one of reverence, of empowerment, of sacred connection to the divine feminine. And to appreciate the date, we have to kind of uncover, the spiritual essence, kind of reclaim its importance of the day of the goddess and her creative power. Now, let me say that talking about the divine feminine is not a dismissal of the divine masculine. We have to have both. In order to be balanced, we have to have both. And what has happened is that we used to have both, and then we've kind of gotten out of kilter a little bit. And so, one of my most favorite aspects or representation of the divine masculine and the divine feminine is Jesus or Yeshua and Mary Magdalene. So, if you want to keep those two in mind, also King Arthur and Guinevere, those literary characters as well make me think about that. But there's a lot of difference with that. So, what we're going to do is just kind of look at first the divine feminine, which is the essence of all of us. We have divine masculine and divine feminine in us. As a female, I some of my past careers have had me be a little bit more masculine, but in my practices, I'm more feminine. So you'll notice all the pink and all of that, the red for power and black for protection, things like that. So don't think it's one or the other against each other, and think about the fact that we need to balance it all. The divine masculine is logic and numbers and sometimes type A personalities, and that was kind of where I've lived for a long time. The divine feminine is trusting your intuition, having compassion, knowing where people are coming from. And there's a time and place for both. So let's just talk about first about Friday and how that's connected to the divine feminine. Friday's always a sacred day of love. It's a day of creation and a day of abundance. And when we start talking about creation, especially with females, I am not necessarily talking about creating a baby. That is a wonderful aspect, but many people do not have that ability or choose not to have children. So the way that I look at creation is creating things. So those of you all who are artists, writers, you create something wonderful and beautiful in the world. You have a smile for everyone and you create happiness and joy. That is creation. That's your sacral chakra. Those are the lower three chakras of the divine feminine. And abundance doesn't necessarily have to do with money. Abundance can be having a lot of friends or having one or two friends that are always there for you, having what you need, but then also the abundance of happiness, the abundance of peace. So let's go ahead and look at Friday in that day of the sacred love. So Friday is very sacred. In a lot of spiritual traditions, because of the connection of the divine feminine in mythology, and remember, mythology does not mean fake, mythology means mythos, so that's a cultural story that's been passed down. Um, it has also linguistic origins, it has spiritual symbolism that we'll talk about. But Friday embodies the creative, the nurturing, and the life sustaining energies traditionally associated with the divine feminine. So there's a couple of Norse goddesses where the day Friday originated from. So Freya Day or Frigg's Day, and they are both Norse goddesses. And Freya is the goddess of love, fertility, beauty, magic. She's closely associated with abundance of sexuality and the life-giving power of nature. To me, she reminds me of the maiden in the maiden mother and crone aspect of the triple goddess. She's a symbol of beauty, a symbol of power. She emphasizes her connection to luxury and prosperity. She also, you usually will see her with a chariot pulled by two cats. And I absolutely love that because you know I love cats. But she presides over the realm of the afterlife. So she has a dual role of creator and transformer. And that's what you're going to notice with a lot of women is that, or goddesses, throughout history is that they are a creator, but then also a transformer. So they guide us from life to death. Because if you think about it during those times, when you are giving birth, you usually have a midwife. When you are at your deathbed, there's usually a nursemaid taking care of you. So women have always played these roles as healer, as advisor, as nurturer, and things like that. So besides Freya is Frigg, and she's considered the wife of Odin. She is more um, kind of like the mother aspect because she's the goddess of marriage, goddess of motherhood, the goddess of destiny, and she represents the wisdom and the foresight also of the crone or the wise woman. She has a nurturing aspect of the feminine divine, but she also has a context of family and home. So together with Freya and Frigg, they embody the spectrum of the feminine power, sensuality, passion, wisdom, all of that. And they help connect these energies to you. Now, let's look again at Venus and the feminine. In Roman tradition, Friday is associated with Venus, the goddess of love, the goddess of beauty, the goddess of fertility. She mirrors the attributes of Freya as both deity. She celebrates passion, she celebrates harmony, she celebrates creativity. But for her influence, or anyone who wants to work with Venus on Friday, is a day of honoring relationships, looking at how things are beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, and then looking at the creation of life in all forms, not just human, not just animal, but the creation of life. So for the Romans, Venus was not just a goddess of romantic love, but also of, of a goddess of natural cycles, of growth and renewal, looking at relationships of mother and child, your partner relationships, your adult mother, you as an adult with your mother, I should say. So it is a little different. It all has to do with love. So Friday is a day for honoring the feminine idea, and across a lot of cultures, that's when they celebrate it. It's like I said, it's not just love or anything else. It's seeking blessings for prosperity. It's seeking blessings for harmony, for renewal. And besides creation and nurturing, Friday and the 13th specifically seems to align with the natural rhythms, the cycle of the moon, the seasons, life, and it reflects the feminine's understanding of change and growth and transformation. But the connection between Friday and the number 13 deepens the day's association with the divine, the moon. It's a symbol of intuition, a symbol of femininity. It cycles 13 times in a lunar year. And for women, the lunar cycle corresponds with the menstrual cycle, making the number 13 a symbol of feminine power and transformation. On Fridays, especially if you were hitting your cycle at that time, it was illuminated even more. And it was, in some cultures, a day of ritual reflection or spiritual empowerment. So, also with the 13 lunar cycles, they last 28 days, as we know. Um, it also has to do with the fact that the moon governs different aspects of our life. It's a celestial body. And if you'll notice, a lot of times when you go back in history, the moon in darkness is considered bad, where the light and the sun are considered good, and the sun is masculine and the moon is feminine. So you're going to notice that as well. And so when we talk about like the tides, the moon's gravitational pull controls kind of the ebbs and flows of the Earth's oceans. And this is a life sustaining power of water. And this is a lot of power. And then with water representing emotions, intuition, and your subconscious, this gave a lot of power to the feminine deities and the feminine beliefs, which people were not happy with at the time. And with it being a connection of emotions, they felt like the moon can control your emotions. So if you were outside at night, then you could turn into something totally different. But where women would see it as like a guide to the inner or unseen world, a connection to their intuition, and looking at the idea of growing and knowing about everything. Um, the moon itself is actually associated with goddesses Artemis, Selene, and Hecate. And they govern the tides, they govern the emotions, intuition, and all of that. And so therefore they had a lot of power. So Artemis is the Greek in Greek mythology is the goddess of the hunt, wild animals, and the moon, which I find is very masculine because it's the goddess of the hunt, and we always think about hunters being men. But if you remember any of your Greek mythology, she would protect the animals, but she would only hunt for what is needed. It was not a sport, it was not a game. The animals would come to her and provide food for the families, provide pelts or coats for warmth and things like that. And she was always a protector of women and a really good sign of independence. So the fact that she was the hunter or the goddess of the hunt meant that women could be independent from men. And in some cultures, women were the hunters. Selene, also in Greek mythology, was the actual personification of the moon herself. People believe that that was the name of the moon. And she embodied the entire power and beauty of the moon, and she represented the constancy of there, but the consistency of the movement, the change of the cycles, and that the rhythm of the cosmos was connected with her, and that she had the timeless wisdom of the feminine. Hecate, it depends upon how you want to say it. She's also from Greek mythology, and she's often misunderstood. She's also considered one of the darker goddesses. She is a goddess of the moon, magic, the underworld. And if you notice, anytime there has to be with death, and there's a goddess associated with the underworld, a lot of times they are considered darker. It's just because their role of transitions, meeting at the crossroad, the mysteries of death that we don't know about, causes them to have a lot of hidden knowledge, and therefore a lot of people are skeptical of them. But being not fearful of death gives you a lot of power. And so her transformative power of that into the feminine energy really releases a lot of knowledge, because when you don't live in fear, you're happy. You can see things for what they are. You can live life to the fullest. So there's other cultures as well that revere the number 13. Native American traditions. Now remember, not all Native Americans believe the same thing. So, but many indigenous peoples viewed the year's 13 lunar cycles as sacred. Some believed the turtle shells with the 13 little segments on their back were seen to represent the cycles, and they were used in ceremonies to honor nature's rhythms. Ancient Egyptian beliefs felt like 13 represented the transformation and renewal. For instance, it's believed that the soul passed through 12 stages of death, and with the 13th being eternal life. And this concept of eternal life is tied to the goddess Isis and her role as a restorer of life, because she brought her husband back from the dead. In the Celtic tradition, the number 13 was linked to the lunar cycle and sacred trees. And remember, the Celts always, I mean, think about where they lived, and their the environment around them was beautiful trees, and the trees was a deep connection to the cycles of nature and the cycles of feminine wisdom. But, the patriarchal influence led into the demonization of Friday the 13th. So, to fully understand the demonization of Friday the 13th, we need to look at how patriarchal systems and monotheistic religions systematically work to suppress the feminine divine. Along with the cultural significance of sacred numbers and feminine associated days, they got rid of a lot of things. So, in ancient societies, the divine feminine was central to spiritual and cultural practices. Goddess worship was common in many early civilizations in societies. Let's do it that way. And some of the deities were Isis, Inanna, and Artemis, where they represented fertility, wisdom, and life giving power. I absolutely love Isis. She is one that I like to work with the Sisterhood of the Rose. Inanna is another one, an ancient goddess from the Babylonian Sumerian era. She has different names depending upon what culture you're looking at. And Artemis is one that we tend to forget a lot. And she is just wonderful with fertility and wisdom. So, with the rise of the patriarchal systems, the focus shifted towards male dominated deities. And we started doing a solar based calendar. We used to be on a lunar calendar. So, the moon's association with the feminine and its connection to mystery, intuition, and cycles became less valued. And over time, practices and symbols that celebrated the feminine were demonized or forgotten. So Friday, associated with the goddess, like I said, Freya and Venus, was a day to honor love, beauty. But when patriarchal religions began to dominate, they worked to displace this sacred ideas. The goddess associated with love and fertility were recast as temptresses. I'll get that right in a second. Or symbols of sin. And think about today how any female who takes up the idea of love and is confident in herself with her sexuality is seen as sinful. And so Fridays became kind of ordinary, or even in times unlucky days. And one of the most important, what is the word? The negative, the demonization of Friday the 13th was the fact that instead of transformation and us helping with the beginning of life, the beginning of death, the sexuality, our creation, it became dangerous and disruptive and chaos. And it began to be forgetting the word here, taken over by 12, the number 12, the number 12 of completion, representing 12 months, 12 apostles, those types of things. Where when you study the divine feminine, the 13th apostle was Mary Magdalene. And that brought in a lot of chaos, that brought in a lot of disruption. And so that's one of the ideas of Friday the 13th. But the turning point was really the Templars. The arrest of the Knights Templars on Friday, October 13th in 1307 marked a really important pivotal moment in the cultural demonization of Friday the 13th. The Templars were powerful medieval order with connections to a lot of esoteric knowledge. Esoteric knowledge is knowledge of the spiritual world, things that are not necessarily known by everyone. And some of this included the reverence for the feminine principles. But their downfall was led by King Philip IV of France and endorsed by Pope Clement V. And it was politically motivated, but became a symbolization of betrayal and misfortune. The historical significance of this event deeply influenced the Western perceptions of Friday the 13th. As the story of the Templars' demise spread, the date, which is when they were supposed to have been arrested, Friday the 13th, began to be associated with treachery and ill fate. And instead of building into what it was, it began to overshadow its original spiritual significance. And the narrative was added onto by the broader cultural trend of demonizing the sacred feminine. So, with the rise of Christianity, it continued to marginalize the goddess worship. Sacred feminine figures were often absorbed into Christian narratives, stripped of their power, labeled a lot of times as heretics. It's just like Mary, the mother of Jesus, retained some aspects of the divine feminine, but was recast in a submissive maternal role rather than a creator or a leader. Meanwhile, pagan goddesses and their associated practices were branded as witchcraft. And remember, the idea of witchcraft most of the time is thrown upon women who are wise, women who are creators, women who are powerful, and it's the fear that goes through. So the church were to discredit the lunar calendar, replacing it with the solar based system. And this prioritized masculine energy. And then the practices connected to the moon and the number 13 were deemed superstitious or evil. And this shift further solidified the perception of Friday the 13th as a day of ill fortune rather than a day of divine connection. So, over centuries, Friday the 13th began embedded in our culture. It was reinforced by folklore, by literature, by media. Think about all the books and the stories and things that you've read about Friday the 13th. Black cats, those types of things. And it's always stories of bad luck and tragedy happens on those days. And this kind of created a cultural superstition that made us forget its original meaning. Most people today do not know the original meaning of Friday the 13th. And the vilification of this date reflects a broader pattern of undermining feminine power, intuition, and wisdom. But that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this today, because everyone's like, oh, it's bad, Friday the 13th. But really, we need to reclaim Friday the 13th. And by understanding the historical context of Friday the 13th, it allows us to reclaim its sacred significance. Looking at how patriarchal systems distorted its meaning, we can take that back and celebrate the divine feminine, the creativity and nature. But reclaiming this is part of a broader movement to restore balance between masculine and feminine energies, acknowledging the value of intuition, emotions, but also valuing the idea of logic and order. This isn't to overthrow, but it is to reclaim and come back to where we were. It's really a way to bring us back into balance. So some of the things that we can do, I think I'll give you like 4 or 5 of these. Honor the moon and lunar cycles. Connect with the moon's energy through rituals, meditations, journaling. I have a lunar moon mini workshop that you're welcome to email me about. I think it's $10 for the workshop, and it helps you reflect the cycles in your life, what's ending, what's beginning, and how you can align with your natural rhythms through there. You can celebrate the idea of creativity, the celebrate abundance. Many times don't acknowledge abundance as well. When we're looking at creation, art, writing, gardening, cooking, this is a day to honor that creative power and do that. Consider what you're bringing into existence. And on Friday, especially Friday the 13th, you can nurture it and it comes into abundance. You can also connect with the goddesses. You can light a candle, create an altar, offer a prayer to the deities, asking for guidance or wisdom. My two favorite are Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene, but I also like Isis as well as Hecate and a few of the others. So if you look at different things, don't think it's black and white. Don't think it's one way or the other. Spirituality is a combination of beliefs. Um, you can also, the fourth thing you might can do to honor this and to bring us back as a sacred day is to embrace the intuition of inner wisdom of the number 13. Connect with your inner voice. Meditate. Use oracle cards. Use tarot cards for wisdom. Do a dream journal. Trust that the messages you receive come from a place of deep wisdom. And then also gather in the community on Friday the 13th is a great day to come with others and share your appreciation for the divine feminine. You can do a moon circle, a goddess gathering, a woman's circle to celebrate the collective power of creation and support. As Friday the 13th reminds us of strength and beauty and wisdom, and many times the world undervalues these qualities, this day would be a wonderful time to gather and honor those, to create, to heal, and transform. And it is a call to reclaim our connection to the sacred cycles of nature and to recognize the divine in ourselves. Many times people have a hard time recognizing the divine within themselves. They say things to themselves that they wouldn't even say to their friends. One of the things that we need to do is stop letting society define who we are and how we're supposed to look and what we're supposed to do. By embracing Friday the 13th as a day of empowerment, we can shift its narrative from one superstition to one of reverence. We can reclaim it through celebrations of life and love, and we need a lot of love in today's world. We can celebrate the boundless creative energy that flows through everything. Can you imagine if we began creating things, what would happen? So let's take on a global call to embrace the divine feminine. Let's bring on a resurgence of interest in ancient traditions and goddess spirituality that suggests that humanity is yearning for balance. I see the divine feminine rising. I see her calling us to heal the rift between masculine and feminine energies. We need healing. We need the balance. And by honoring sacred days like Friday the 13th, we contribute to this healing and help restore harmony in ourselves and the world. And in doing so, we not only honor the goddess, but also our divine potential. Friday the 13th becomes not a day to fear, but a day to celebrate, a day to recognize the sacred within and around us, and to step fully into our power as co-creators of life and beauty. So my wish is that I would love for the sacred day of Friday the 13th to inspire you to embrace your creative essence, connect with the cycles of nature, honor your divine feminine, learn more about the goddesses and the history of female power, and then look at what is within you. Friday is a day of love and a day of creation. So let me know in the comments below what you created today. I created this podcast. I love creating lessons and classes and learning and things like that. That is my creativity. It's what makes me happy. So take today and start thinking about how we can change the idea of Friday the 13th. I want to thank you all for listening. And again, email me, Bertina@bertina.org, if you can't comment below because of whatever platform this ends up on. And let me know what you've done to create. Let me know some more ideas that you would like for me to talk about. And also remember on Bertina.org, this will be posted as a blog so that you can go back and look at some things. So subscribe to my blog there. Subscribe here to Spotify. Please kind of help me. I'm just getting started and I really do enjoy this. I just wish that um, I could reach out, branch out. So that is part of my day today. I'm going to light a candle for abundance of listeners. Thank you all very much, and I hope that you have a wonderful weekend.